My name is Marin Vale, 32 years old. The winter along the Polish border had a way of sanding you down to essentials: breath, bone, orders, until even your thoughts came out frosted. Our convoy crawled through sleet and black ice, an armored centipede of trucks stacked with blankets, antibiotics, powdered milk, the humble things that hold a life together when the world refuses to. Engines droned like a low choir under the wind. The radio ticked warnings in clipped bursts. No stops, conserve fuel, bandit chatter on rural routes. We were to keep moving. We always were. I told my driver, Jenkins, to drop a gear before the curve, and he did it by feel, eyes flicking between the mirror and the snow-streaked road. His breath fogged the inside of his balaclava. "Ma'am, visibility's trash," he muttered. "If a moose stepped out right now, I'd only know because we hit it." "Eyes forward," I said, trying to make the words warm rather than sharp. The wind hammered the Humvee and rattled something in the back. My hands were steady on my rifle and not at all steady in my chest. Discipline is a reflex until it's not, until something human wedges itself into the gears and asks what the rules are for. We crested a rise, and there they were, almost not real at first. A woman and a small boy standing just off the shoulder, tucked against a broken fence line where reeds clawed at the drifts. No waving, no wild signals, just a stillness that read like surrender. The child's coat swallowed him. The woman's scarf had gone stiff in the cold and rhymed white at her breath. I felt that pinch at the base of the skull I've learned to trust more than any doctrine. "Don't," Jenkins said quietly. "Please don't. We're not supposed to break." He didn't mean break convoy. He meant break faith with the rules that keep people alive. The radio crackled again. Fuel calculations, daylight loss, a reminder that desperate people used decoys. Our intel slides had shown it plainly last week. Impersonators on the road, false distress, sudden swarm. It's almost funny how your mind can hold a slide deck and a pair of eyes at the same time, and both can feel true. My father's voice drifted up from some old, unkind place. "Lead with your head, kid. Heart gets you hurt." I tapped my mic. Viper 6, slowing to short halt. A beat of static. Then my lieutenant's voice. "Negative, Viper 6. No halts. Repeat, no halts." "Copy," I said. "Short halt, 60 seconds." Jenkins's glance was a plea and an accusation. I kept mine on the road. "Pull over." The tires took their bite from black ice like it offended them. Wind knifed in when I cracked the door, and the air felt like crushed glass in the lungs. I took my last ration, heat pouch still viable, a mercy, and walked through powder that rose to my shins. The woman tried to speak. English cracked under the cold in her mouth. She gestured. The boy, her stomach, a small circle-like apology. He didn't cry. He just looked at me with the kind of unschooled patience that says someone already learned not to expect help. I opened the pouch and pushed it into his hands. "Eat," I said, and shaped the word with my face as much as my voice. He watched his mother. She nodded. The tiniest movement, and everything in me loosened as if a valve had turned. For a second, the wind sounded like surf. For a second, I forgot there were rules. "Captain," Jenkins hissed behind me, low and urgent. "We're a billboard out here." I turned my body sideways to cut the wind and to make less of a target. "Another 30, I said, though I'd already decided on 10. The boy's hands trembled. The woman reached for mine, and her fingers were so cold they felt warm, that awful, deceptive warmth that means you're on the edge. She didn't thank me. She didn't need to. What passed between us wasn't gratitude. Recognition is the only word that fits. Two people agreeing that the world is unbearable and still must be born. I pointed toward the trees as if direction could be a language. "There," I said softly. "Shelter." My breath turned the word to smoke. She followed my hand and nodded once. I backed away and put my glove on with a bite of teeth, then climbed into the Humvee. "Move," I told Jenkins. "Slow roll, no chatter on net." We slid back into our place in the chain, and the snow swallowed them as if I'd imagined the whole thing. The radio kept being a metronome. The convoy exhaled and carried on. By nightfall, the wind had sandpapered the tents to a steady rasp. In the chow line, a corporal I barely knew bumped my shoulder with his tray and said, "Heard you took a scenic route, Cap." He meant nothing by it. He meant everything by it. In the munitions bay, Phelps lit a cigarette in the doorway and blew smoke like he was offering it to the cold. "You got a soft spot," he said without preface. "Don't we all?" "Not where anyone can see." He smirked, but the smirk was a scab over an old cut. "Word is, there's an investigation for an unscheduled stop. Word is someone filed clean." I swallowed the aluminum taste of bad news. "Who?" He shrugged. "Could be nobody with teeth. Could be somebody who likes paper more than people. Could be somebody doing you a favor. Better a report than a rumor." That thought lodged like grit. A kindness wearing the mask of accusation. Procedure as protection. Or not. 2 days later, my name was on a list. Report to headquarters. 0800. No reason given. I scrubbed my uniform until the seams looked cruel, polished my boots because it was something I could control. Jenkins hovered near the trucks in the yard and worked his jaw like he was chewing worry. "You want me to say it was miscommunication, ma'am? I can make it sound good." "You filed your truth," I said. "I'll file mine." Headquarters was a converted municipal block that had never been warm in its life. Radiators coughed up ghosts. The hall smelled of diesel and old coffee and effort. An aide with a thin mouth opened the general's door and announced me, as if the title made me heavier. I stood at attention, then stood very still at ease, because my hands, if they were visible, might tell a story I didn't want to tell. Major General Wittmann had the stillness of a man who had once been noise. No medals on display, no family photos, just maps layered like palimpsests and a space heater that murmured, as if eavesdropping. "Captain Vale," he said, and my new name with my old rank sounded like a test. "Convoy route Delta Kilo. You stopped for civilians." "Yes, sir." "You know that's a violation." "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because the boy's eyes were glass, and I'm not a machine. Because rules without reasons are rituals. Because my father taught me a version of honor that didn't know how to account for a frozen child." "Because there was a woman and a child," I said, careful and slow. "Because I had one ration left and an extra minute to spare." He studied me in a way that felt less like judgment and more like inventory. What could be relied on? What would bend before it broke? "You jeopardized a convoy for a pouch of calories," he said. "I jeopardized nothing. Less than 60 seconds. Perimeter eyes on. Engines hot. No contact." Silence expanded. In it I could hear, impossibly, the scratch of a typewriter. Somewhere outside, and the wind making its long argument with the eaves, he leaned back and laced his fingers. "You're a good officer, Captain. Your record reads like a metronome. That's praise where I come from. Compassion in uniform can kill people." "Understood, sir," I said, and meant it, but so can failing to remember why the uniform exists. A long beat, then a sliver of something like a smile, not at me, but at a memory that had arrived uninvited. "You sound like I did once," he said. "Afghanistan. One of mine gave his gloves to a boy, lost 2 fingers that night, said he'd do it again. I didn't know where to put that, so I filed it under human." Wittmann closed the folder with the gentle finality of a good teacher. "You won't be punished," he said. "Be more careful. Out here, heroics are often just miscalculations that didn't get the chance to prove it." He paused, then added, as if it were an afterthought when nothing in his life had ever been. "Where exactly did you stop?" I gave the landmarks and the kilometers from Checkpoint Charlie, the kind of precise truth that can be a confession or a key depending on the lock. He wrote it down without looking at me. "Thank you." I saluted and turned to go. My hand was on the door when his voice, calm, measured, careful, reached me. "Captain," he said, "next time, think about how to build the moment into the plan before the moment arrives." It sounded like a warning. It sounded like a benediction. Out in the corridor, the aide kept his face neutral because that's a skill and a shield. At the top of the stairwell, I stopped and held the cold railing until my fingers hurt. I had the coordinates sitting in his ink like a drop of blood. I had the wind in my ears. I had the suspicion that the report had never been about punishment, but about triangulation, someone somewhere wanting to line up truth and rumor and gratitude in the same crosshairs. Jenkins found me near the motor pool and squinted against the light. "Well?" "Not torn apart," I said. "Not stitched back up either." I tried for a smile and made half of one. He asked for the exact spot. Jenkins frowned. Weird ask. "Not if he needs to verify logs," I said, giving him the version that would let him sleep. I didn't offer the other version, the one that pulsed under my ribs. Not over. Not by a long shot. The wind came off the yard, smelling like jet fuel and snow, and somewhere beyond the wire a place on the road waited, recorded now in the general's hand. I didn't know if I'd just handed myself a future or stepped into one that had already been set for me. That night, the tent canvas rattled like an animal trying to get in. Phelps settled on the crate across from me and smoked in violation of at least 3 small rules and 1 big common sense. Word is, he said, they're seeing more decoys on the secondary roads. Word is, I said, someone in this unit believes in paper. Paper's how ghosts move, he said, and crushed his cigarette into a tin lid. Also how people save your ass if they're smart about it. I lay awake listening to the heaters hum and the storm argue with itself. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a boy's hands around a silver pouch and a woman's nod that wasn't thanks. I told myself I'd done right. I told myself right was a slippery word. I told myself to learn how to do this again if asked. Only better, only smarter, only without luck. Somewhere far off, a generator coughed and caught. I tried to sleep with my boots not quite under the cot the way my father taught me, ready for whatever came next. Morning came metallic and pale, the kind of light that made every edge in camp look sharper than it needed to be. I wrapped my hands around a mug that tasted more like generator exhaust than coffee and told myself to pretend it was heat. The bulletin board outside HQ had a fresh sheet pinned crooked under frost. Distinguished visitors. All officers on standby. Security heightened. In our world, that meant variable schedules, a bigger perimeter, more eyes, and fewer excuses. I folded the edge of the paper once, twice, and felt that weight in my gut again when I saw my name on a separate slip. Capt. Vale, 0900, Command. Jenkins walked with me as far as the steps and then stalled like a spooked horse. Ma'am, if this is about the stop, it's about leadership optics or a reprimand dressed like a handshake, I said. Either way, I can salute it. He nodded, jaw tapping against his collar, the way it did when he was making a decision to be brave. I'll be at Motorpool if you need a ride after. Inside, the hallway felt warmer and meaner. Voices echoed with a kind of borrowed dignity. I could hear a child laugh somewhere behind a closed door, high and bright, a sound that didn't belong in a building held together by diesel smell and willpower. My palm hit the jam and stayed there, feeling the steel like a pulse. Captain Vale! Wittmann's voice called from his office, steady and composed. Come in. The maps were gone from the wall, replaced by a NATO banner that made the room look staged, like a photograph waiting for an official caption. A coffee pot hissed in the corner. The general stood behind his desk, and beside him a woman with a scarf wound neatly at her neck, and a small boy holding the edge of her coat like it was a tether he understood better than any language. The room narrowed to a pinhole. That scarf. The rhymed fabric in the wind. Those eyes, open without asking. My hand finished the salute like a reflex learned so deep it did not care if the brain was present. At ease, Captain, Wittmann said, gentler than last time. Not softer exactly, just warmer at the edges. He turned to the woman. My dear, this is the officer. She stepped closer, nerves visible in the tremor of her fingers. Her English came wrapped in careful syllables. You, road, snow. Her hand hovered, unsure whether to offer it. I bridged the distance. Her grip surprised me. Firm, honest. The boy peered around her and then reached into his pocket like he had practiced this moment. He held out a small, wrinkled chocolate wrapper, the same dull silver I'd shoved into a pocket 2 weeks ago, without thinking it would ever matter to anyone. He keep, she said, from you. My throat closed up and I nodded so I wouldn't have to try words. I took the wrapper like taking a medal. It crinkled in my palm with a sound that felt louder than the heater, the coffee, the air. Wittmann watched the exchange with a look you don't learn in the military. You earn it somewhere else, somewhere bare. Captain, he said, you didn't know who they were when you stopped. That's what matters. He glanced at the chair as if to offer a ritual that might make this less strange. Sit, please. I sat. The woman, Anna, I'd learn in a moment, took the seat opposite and held her son's shoulder, thumb rubbing small circles like a metronome of safety. We were, how you say, separate from car, she said. Storm take radio. We wait. Many cars pass. You stop. Her eyes glistened and then steadied. I tell my husband, we must find soldier. He say, we have rule. I say, we have heart also. A sound like a laugh, like a surrender, escaped the general and died before it could be called either. We tried to trace the moment through telemetry and reports, he said, casual as a man discussing weather, which is why I asked for the exact location. The chain that begins with compassion ends in paperwork. It's a law of this building. He watched my face take that in. Somebody filed an unscheduled stop. Someone else cross-checked humanitarian convoy positions. It wasn't a trap, Captain Vale. It was a way to make sure gratitude had coordinates. For a second I hated that anything gentle must be triangulated to be real. Then I loved it because sometimes that's the only way you keep truth from dissolving into rumor. Pin it where you can find it again. There was a knock. The aide brought in a folder and left it with eyes that had learned not to see. Wittmann didn't open it. There's no reprimand in here, he said. There is, however, a problem that will grow teeth. We're seeing more decoy tactics on secondary routes. People with nothing learn fast from people with worse intentions. I thought of the intel slide with stick figures and arrows, a cold cartoon of desperation. Then our kindness needs a plan, I said, the words arriving before I knew I'd believe them. Thermal scan before dismount. Aid drops from standoff with cover vehicles. Rigid time limits baked into SOP. Build the human moment into the protocol so it stops being a miscalculation. Anna's mouth curved in a small, tired smile, approval from a court I hadn't realized I wanted. The boy had moved to the window, breath fogging the glass in circles he wiped with his sleeve. He set his palm against the pane like he was teaching himself the shape of safety. We'll talk about that, Wittmann said, and I heard the rare thing in his tone. Someone willing to admit the rules still had room to grow. He stood. For now, know this. You reminded me why I wear this. He tapped the eagle, globe, and anchor as if it needed proof. Then, almost as an afterthought, there will be visitors today. Diplomats, teachers from a Polish school, photographs. His mouth flattened. I don't like ceremony, but sometimes it cleans a story so it can be seen. When I left the office, the hallway seemed shorter. The aide's neutral face cracked into something like a ghost of kindness when his eyes fell on the wrapper in my hand. Good day, Captain, he said, and meant it. Outside, the cold found the gap at my collar and slid down like a blade, but my shoulders had forgotten how to hunch. Jenkins was waiting, hands stuffed into his gloves, pretending he hadn't been counting seconds. They hang you or hand you a halo? Neither, I said. He said my compassion needs a plan. He blinked, then grinned. That's the first time I've heard a general use the word compassion without it sounding like a tripwire. We headed toward the motor pool through a brightness that didn't warm anything but made shadows honest. On the way, a senior captain I'd never traded more than a nod with fell into step beside us. Vale, he said, the syllable flat as snow. Sir. Word is you're protected now. His smile tried to be friendly and failed. Must be nice. I met his look without heat. Word is I'm tired like the rest of you, I said. We all still freeze the same. He studied my face like I might flinch. When I didn't, he shrugged. Watch the secondary roads tonight. They're leaving bait by culverts. He peeled away without waiting for thanks. Phelps, who had drifted close enough to hear, snorted. See, it starts with envy and ends with advice. Men are complicated even when they're simple. We spent the afternoon making the convoy smarter than it had been yesterday. Jenkins and I met with the scout team and rewrote contact drills without calling them that. Thermals check, drone up for a minute to read for cluster heat signatures, drop small aid bundles from a distance where the ice holds heavy tires, keep engines hot, time each stop the way surgeons time oxygen. If compassion could be made efficient, we would give it that dignity. Looks like you're planning to break the rules again, Jenkins said, tapping a checklist with his pencil. I'm planning to stop pretending that rules and needs have to be enemies, I said. I'm planning to make room. Dusk made the snow bruise purple. We rolled out with headlights hooded and radios strict. 10 kilometers from the wire, the scouts called it. 2 figures, east ditch, no movement, no wave. My chest went quiet. I could feel the convoy as a single organism, hearts synced by fear and training. Thermals? I asked. Negative cluster, 2 cold bodies, 1 warmer by 2 degrees. Drone, I said. The small rotor rose, invisible until it wasn't. The feed came in shaky, but clear enough. 2 forms, no shadow masses nearby, no heat signatures in the scrub beyond. It told me nothing and everything. My mouth tasted of old pennies. "Drop," I said. Jenkins had already cut the engine to idle and grabbed the aid bundle. He tossed it toward the ditch with an arc like he'd been born to throw lifelines. I counted. 20 seconds. 30. The taller figure moved first. Slow, careful. The practiced reach of someone who knows generosity can be a hook. The smaller shape stayed curled. No rush. No surge from the dark. "Go," I said. We rolled. The mirror gave me one image for free. A head lifting, a hand against a mouth. Not a wave, just proof of breath. I breathed too. Back inside the wire, the wordless relief felt like heat. The senior captain from earlier found me near the fuel point. He looked at the drone remote in my hand, at the checklist clipped to my vest. "You built a way," he said. It wasn't a question. "We built it," I said, and left space in the sentence for his name. His mouth twitched. "Don't get used to me being agreeable." He hesitated, then added, softer, "Nice work." I took that like medicine. Late, when the camp settled into the kind of quiet that magnifies little sounds, canvas tick, boot scrape, a cough 3/10 over, I sat with the chocolate wrapper open on my knee and the general's words in my ear. "Paper is how ghosts move," Phelps had said. Maybe paper was also how you gave the living a map back to the moment that mattered. I wrote down what we'd done and why, and tucked the wrapper between the pages as if it could anchor the ideas with a weight it didn't possess. I was tired in a new way, the kind that comes when you spend a day bridging 2 truths and neither collapses. The next morning brought another bulletin, this one sharper. Stock thefts in nearby warehouses. Local gangs leveraging chaos. It wasn't our warehouse, it was our problem. The compassionate plan would need a perimeter, too. "You see this?" Jenkins asked, rubbing the heel of his hand against sleep. "I see it," I said. "We build the wall and the gate both." On my way to HQ to brief the idea, I passed the school group gathering near the flagpole under a caretaker's eye. A boy laughed. A different boy, a different laugh, but it pinged the same place in me. I kept walking. In the corridor, the aide who never seemed to fully exist offered a nod deep enough to count. "Captain," he said. "Good morning." "Morning," I returned. He looked at the folder he was carrying as if it were heavy for reasons beyond paper. "You should know," he said, voice low. "The first stop report? It didn't come from your team." He glanced toward the closed office door. "It came from the humanitarian unit. Someone wanted to find you." "Anna," I said without meaning to. His face did that neutral thing again. "Names aren't helpful," he said, "which is how this building says yes." I knocked. "Enter," the general said, and when I did, he was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, an unmilitary posture that made him look momentary, almost ordinary. "About last night," he said, turning. "The drone, the timed stop, the bundles, word traveled." He grimaced. "Which is to say, someone complained and someone praised you. That means you likely did it right." "Sir," I said, and laid the plan for the warehouses over the morning like a map. He listened. Halfway through, he interrupted me with an open palm, not to stop me, but to slow the room down. "Do you know the hardest part of command, Captain Vale?" He didn't wait for my guess. "It's remembering that people aren't problems to be solved. They're risks to be stewarded. You helped me remember that. Don't let me forget again." I nodded, because anything else would have been too much and not enough. He looked toward the door. "You have a convoy at dusk?" "Yes, sir." "Then go get some sleep. Compassion is expensive if you run it on fumes." I left the office with the wrapper in my pocket and the shape of a plan in my head that felt less like heroism and more like homework. Outside, the wind had dropped to a whisper. The flags hung with the heavy grace of things that have learned how to withstand weather without telling you about it. I thought of the boy at the window with his palm against the glass and the circle his breath had made. We make our own warmth where we can. We codify it when we're lucky, and when we're very lucky, we find the coordinates again in time to pass them on. By the time the sun slid sideways behind the warehouse's jagged roofs, the unit had memorized the new drill like a song. I checked my watch, the perimeter, the way Jenkins rolled his shoulders to shake off the ache. "Ready?" I asked. "Always," he said, which meant never, which meant yes. Engines coughed to life, radios clicked and cleared. Somewhere in the city, a group of people had made a plan to take what they needed by force or fear. Somewhere on the road, another woman might be teaching her son how to be patient with the world. In the space between those somewheres, we moved. The hangar smelled like wet metal and disinfectant, a strange church with NATO flags for stained glass. Rows of chairs faced a plywood stage that pretended to be a podium, and men and women who didn't have time for pageantry sat like they'd remembered how to be polite. I took a seat near the back with the other captains. Jenkins slid in on my left and said out of the corner of his mouth, "If they play a marching band, I'm defecting to the Air Force." "No band," I said. "Just heat lamps and speeches." The hush that follows a decision rolled through the room when Wittmann walked out. He didn't love ceremony. You could see it in the set of his shoulders, but he submitted to it the way a man submits to weather. Beside him stood Anna in a gray coat and her son in a sweater too neat for the hangar's drafts. My chest went tight the way it does when two timelines fold into each other, the road with its blade wind and this clean light with its polite clatter. 2 weeks ago, the general said, one of our officers made a decision that broke regulation and preserved something older than any rule. His eyes found me in the back without searching. Captain Vale, front and center. When you walk the center aisle in dress blues, you can hear your life in the heel strikes. I climbed the 2 shallow steps and stopped where tape on the floor told me to. He didn't read the citation. He didn't need to. An aide opened a small case, and Wittmann pinned a simple silver-edged ribbon above my left pocket. He leaned in just enough that only I could hear. "Thank you for reminding me why we do this." I nodded, because if I tried to speak, the words might not make it across the air. Anna stepped forward, took my hand in both of hers, and said, "You teach my boy that uniform can mean kindness." The boy's salute was very serious, the way children practice being adults, and it landed harder than the ribbon's weight. Applause rose and faded, not the roaring kind, the respectful kind you give to a truth that doesn't need noise. I walked back past faces I knew and faces I only thought I'd known. The senior captain, the one who had said "protected," watched me with a look that didn't fit into envy or approval, something more like curiosity admitting it had been wrong before. After, in the hangar's draft, he drifted close enough to talk without raising his voice. "You're getting a lot of credit for a small stop," he said. "It was 60 seconds, I said. "It keeps getting bigger every time someone says it out loud." He glanced at the ribbon, then at my checklist tucked into the folder under my arm. "What you did last night on the road, the drone, the timed bundle, the clean rollout, that's the thing you should be known for." A beat. "We have another problem. Warehouse thefts. We're shoring up ours at dusk." "Then we build a gate you can't run through and a path you don't want to," I said. "We'll sketch it in the briefing." He didn't smile exactly. He just didn't frown. "I'll be there." The briefing room was all hum and pencil scratches. I laid out the plan. Layered perimeter, staggered lighting to kill shadows, choke points that forced approach into fields of view we could actually hold, decoy pallets laced with dye and glitter trackers, because humiliation travels faster through a crew than fear. "We're not just keeping boxes safe," I said. "We're keeping tomorrow's trust with the people who need what's in them." "You'll get pushback," the Intel NCO warned. "The locals think we hoard." "We're going to post a schedule and stick to it," I said. "Predictability is a kind of kindness. It makes room for patience." At dusk, the warehouse looked like a map of our intentions. Cones of light, lanes, a geometry that said someone had thought about this before it happened. Jenkins flexed his hands and then stilled them on the steering wheel. "If I were stealing powdered milk," he said, "I'd try the culvert on the west fence and pretend I was braver than I am." "Then that's where we'll be polite first," I said. They came without drama, 3 silhouettes angling low along the fence line, the 4th hanging back the way leaders do when they want to be brave later. We let them cross the line that changed the conversation and then turned on the light that took away their shadows. "Gentlemen," I said into the loudhailer, "this is aid. We distribute it. That means there's a line. You get in it tomorrow like everyone else." Stupid fights start when someone needs to prove they're a story. Smart fights end when nobody offers one. One of them bolted for the decoy pallet. The dye blew in a cloud, and glitter lit their clothes like a cruel holiday. Jenkins, watching from our angle, couldn't help himself. He laughed, short and unbelieving. "We just weaponized kindergarten." They'll never live it down, I said low. That's the point. The senior captain's team handled the grab with quiet hands, nobody escalating the scene into something it didn't deserve to be. When it was over, he came to where I stood by the ledger we'd brought out to sign the scheduled distribution times. You made that look easy, he said. It wasn't, I said. But it was simple. There's a difference. He looked at me like he'd been inconvenienced by respect. Logistics chief slot is rotating open for the relief column. Wittmann's looking. He didn't say I should put my name in. He didn't have to. Back in my tent, the heaters hummed, the way they do when they have a good day. I opened my journal to tuck the day's checklist inside and found an envelope resting on the page, my name in a slanted hand I knew better than my own. Beaufort, South Carolina postmark. For a long moment I just watched it, like it might spook. Then I slid a finger under the flap. Kid, it began, because he had never been able to call me by my name without making it sound like an order. Read your letter twice. Sat with it a third time and let it do what it needed to. I taught you to lead with your head because I was scared of what your heart would cost you. Truth is, the heart got me through more than my head ever did. I just didn't tell you because I thought it would make you soft. He told a story I'd never heard, about a winter field, a glove given, fingers lost, pride swallowed. He wrote, I used to say heart gets you hurt. I was hiding. What I meant was, heart gets you hurt and keeps you human, and I didn't know how to hold both. You did right. Proud of you. I read it again, and the words blurred and sharpened and settled. Then I put the letter beside the chocolate wrapper and the ribbon case, 3 small artifacts that looked like nothing and weighed like everything. In the morning, Wittmann called me in with that posture he saves for the moments he wants to pretend are routine. Captain Vale, he said, I've reviewed your field reports and last night's perimeter design. Take logistics coordination for the next relief column. It's more responsibility and less sleep. Sir, I said, and felt the ground tilt in the right direction, the way a road does when you finally admit the mountain's going to win unless you respect it. He watched my face for a flicker of fear and found it. Then he smiled, because fear is proof you know what you're doing. One more thing, he said, about your first stop. You should know that the report chain started outside your unit, humanitarian side. Someone was trying to turn gratitude into a breadcrumb trail. Desk turned it into procedure. It wasn't a knife. It was a compass. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. The rumor of betrayal dissolved like salt in hot water. Thank you, I said. I meant for the job. I also meant for the truth. Outside, the camp's noises braided themselves into something almost like music. Laughter shards, the rattle of a fuel pump, the clang of someone dropping a wrench and swearing at it like an old enemy. Phelps appeared with 2 coffees that tasted like radiator water and penance. Heard about the warehouse, he said. Dye and glitter. You're going to hell for that. I'm trying to keep people from bleeding, I said. I'll sit with glitter in purgatory. He studied my ribbon and my face, then decided he believed one of them. You're different now, he said. Everyone is, I said. We just don't always have paperwork to prove it. The day before we rolled the relief column, I walked the length of the supply yard with Jenkins and the senior captain. We argued about the number of buffer trucks and the precise distance for the forward scan and the size of the bundles we could toss without wasting more than we gave. It felt like work that knew what it was for. That night, before lights out, I wrote a line at the bottom of the page where the wrapper and my father's letter rested. Build the human moment into the plan, and it stops being luck. Then I set the pen down and listened to the tent canvas breathe. The wind had calmed to a memory. Somewhere outside a kid, someone's kid, not the boy from the road, just a kid, laughed at something that had nothing to do with rules or ribbons, and the sound reached me like a map back to the center. At dawn, the relief column engines turned over in sequence, a chain of decisions humming to itself. I moved through the line, touching shoulders, calling names, asking the kind of questions that prove you've learned them and not just their roles. The senior captain came up beside me, eyes on the road. Respectfully, he said, handing over a final manifest. It was an apology in the language we speak when we're too careful for the other kind. Received, I said, because forgiveness can be a form stamped and filed as well as a hug. We rolled out under a sky the color of discipline. My radio clicked once, twice, the way it does when a day is about to test you without announcing the subject. I put my hand in my pocket and felt the papery rasp of the wrapper, the folded heft of my father's letter. The column moved like a promise. I believed it. I believed me in it. When the transport touched down at Quantico, Dawn hadn't quite decided what color to be. The tarmac gleamed under floodlights, and the air smelled of pine instead of diesel. I stepped onto American soil with my duffel over one shoulder, my breath visible, my head somewhere else entirely. Home, technically. But home is a strange word when half your soul is still out there in the snow, tracing the line between duty and mercy. The debriefs blurred together. Clipboards, signatures, the low hum of bureaucratic closure. By noon, I was standing outside the administrative building with a folder stamped, "Return to active command, temporary." A staff sergeant handed me another envelope, white with a red border. "Captain Vale, invitation from D.C.," he said, almost smiling. Quiet ceremony for humanitarian distinction. I almost told him no. I'd had enough of rooms where gratitude had to be translated into protocol. But something inside me, it wasn't pride, not exactly, said go. So 2 weeks later, I took the train to Washington, wearing the same dress blues that had carried frost and field dust months ago. The hall wasn't grand. No television crews, no fanfare, just 40 people, a podium, and a Marine Corps motto framed in gold: honor, courage, commitment. 3 words I'd said 1,000 times, now echoing with a meaning I hadn't earned until I failed to follow in order. Major General Wittmann spoke first. His voice carried like it did in the hangar, steady, spare. "Leadership isn't about control," he said. "It's about stewardship." Captain Marin Vale reminded us that compassion is not a luxury, it's the ground beneath discipline. He gestured toward me. "Captain." I rose, pulse steady for once. He pinned a small medal over the ribbon I already wore, silver glint, catching the light. "You saw humanity where procedure saw risk," he said quietly. "That's what our colors stand for when the flags aren't flying." When the applause faded, I saw them. Anna and her son, standing near the back. The boy had grown taller, his hair was longer, his English sharper. He walked toward me, holding something folded, a drawing. Crayons on paper, a Marine in blue, a small figure beside her under falling snow. At the top, in uneven letters, "Thank you, hero." I crouched so we were eye level. "You're the hero," I said. "You survived." He blushed, smiled, then saluted. It was crooked and perfect. Later, as people filtered out, Wittmann joined me by the window overlooking the Potomac. The water carried light like secrets. "Ever think about staying in?" he asked. "Every day," I said. "But I think I'll go home first. Figure out what kind of person I want to be before I decide what kind of officer." He nodded, hands clasped behind his back. "Good answer. Whatever you choose, don't lose what made you disobey me." The Corps needs people like you, people who remember why the rules exist. We shook hands, 2 people who had spent months learning the same lesson from opposite ends of a hierarchy. "Safe travels, Captain," he said. The next morning, I woke in my small Virginia apartment. It didn't feel like mine yet. The walls were blank, the air too quiet. I unpacked my duffel one item at a time: field jacket, journal, gloves stiff with memory. The medal went into a drawer. The chocolate wrapper stayed in the journal. The letter from my father lay between them like a heartbeat folded in paper. That night, I lit a single candle. I'd picked up the habit overseas, one flame for the living, one for the ones you can't forget. The wax bled slowly down the side of the glass. Outside, rain whispered against the window. I opened my journal and read back through everything. The convoy entries, the scribbled diagrams of aid drops, the lines I'd written when I couldn't sleep. At the bottom of the last page, I added one more. "Honor isn't what you're given. It's what you keep alive when no one's watching." Weeks passed quietly. The world moved on, as it always does. The news cycle found new conflicts, new faces, new storms. But every now and then, a letter would arrive at my apartment, handwritten, postmarked from the base. Jenkins sent one first, short and crooked. "Still running your plan. It works. Fewer close calls. Miss the snow less than I thought." Phelps sent a postcard from a coastal town in Italy, scrawled with, "They make coffee here that doesn't taste like radiator water. Miracles exist." And then one day, a small envelope from Beaufort, South Carolina. My father's handwriting again. "Saw your ceremony in a newsletter. Didn't expect to cry at a paragraph. Guess that's growth. I was wrong about heart and command. You prove that. Proud as ever. Don't let the shine fool you. It's still just metal. But what you carry inside you, that's the real metal. Love, Dad. I folded it neatly and slid it behind the first letter. Then I drove home. The house hadn't changed much. The same porch swing with its lazy creak. The same oak tree that had outlived 3 hurricanes. My father opened the door before I could knock. He looked smaller, somehow. Age, maybe. Or just humility finally sitting down in his shoulders. "Captain Vale," he said, but his smile betrayed the joke. "Just Marin," I said, and stepped into the warmth. Dinner was simple. Stew, biscuits, silence filling the spaces where pride used to live. Halfway through, he said, "You remember when I told you heart gets you hurt?" "I remember," I said. He nodded slowly. "You made me rewrite that line." We didn't hug. We didn't need to. Some reconciliations don't require movement. They just require truth staying still long enough to be believed. That night, I walked outside. The air was soft, humid, heavy with cicadas instead of snow. I looked up and thought about all the roads between that fence line and this front porch, how a single decision, 60 seconds long, could echo through command tents, hangars, cities, hearts. The stars looked different here, but maybe that was just peace reframing them. When I returned to my apartment a few days later, a small package waited by the door. No return label, just my name. Inside was a folded scrap of fabric, blue and white, edges frayed. Anna's scarf. Beneath it, a note in careful handwriting. "You said shelter. We found it. Thank you." I sat on the floor for a long time, the scarf pulled across my knees like a memory that refused to fade. Then I placed it with the medal, the wrapper, and my father's letter. 4 keepsakes, 4 corners of the same truth. I didn't frame them. I didn't hang them. I just kept them in the drawer where my hands could find them when the world got loud again. Months later, I received one more message. A photo from Jenkins. The convoy, new recruits lined up for briefing, the words painted across the inside of a Humvee door in neat black stencil. "Build the human moment into the plan." I smiled. The rule had become doctrine, not because someone ordered it, but because someone believed it. That night, before bed, I lit another candle and opened my journal one last time. I didn't write much, just a simple reminder. If you ever doubt what difference one act of kindness makes, remember this. Someone you'll never meet might still be alive because of it. I closed the book, blew out the flame, and sat in the dark a while longer. The quiet wasn't emptiness anymore. It was grace.